From child stars turned psychologists to voice actors who became legends, a bargain basement junkyard car that sparked a Hollywood career, and spelling errors that haunted opening credits for 2 seasons, Wonderbug wasn't just another Saturday morning show. It was a bizarre time capsule of 1970s television that hid secrets stranger than its flying dune buggy ever dreamed. Fact 1. The voice behind Wonderbug became Hollywood's most prolific actor. If you ever wondered who gave Schleppcar and Wonderbug that distinctive mumbling voice, it was Frank Welker, and his career became one of the most remarkable success stories in Hollywood history. Welker started doing voice work in the early 1970s, and Wonderbug was just one of his early gigs in 1976. But what he did after that show is almost unbelievable. Frank Welker went on to become one of the highest-grossing actors of all time, with over 900 voice acting credits spanning more than 5 decades. He's the voice behind Fred in Scooby-Doo, Megatron in the Transformers franchise, Curious George, Garfield, the Cave of Wonders in Aladdin, and literally hundreds of other characters you've heard but probably never realized were all the same person. According to Box Office Mojo, Welker's films have grossed over $17 billion worldwide, putting him ahead of Samuel L. Jackson and other major stars in total box office earnings. The crazy part is that most people have no idea who he is because voice actors rarely get the recognition they deserve, even when they're in nearly every animated film and TV show for half a century. So that silly mumbling car from a low-budget Saturday morning show? That was voiced by someone who would become an absolute legend in the entertainment industry. Fact 2. The license plate had a glaring spelling error. Here's something that slipped past everyone involved with Wonderbug for 2 entire seasons. The show's opening credits featured a close-up shot of Schleppcar's license plate, which read SHLEP. The problem? That's not how you spell Schlepp. Throughout the actual episodes, the car's license plate correctly read SCHLEP, with a C and an H after the S, because the car was named Schleppcar, coming from the Yiddish word meaning a beat-up, worn-out vehicle, or to drag something around. Somehow, the title sequence graphics department missed that C and H, creating a misspelled license plate that appeared at the beginning of every single episode. What makes this even more embarrassing is that this wasn't caught during production, during editing, during the first season, or even between seasons when they could have fixed it for season 2. The mistake aired from 1976 through 1978 without anyone at Sid and Marty Krofft Productions apparently noticing or caring enough to reshoot that one simple shot. For a show that was already dealing with tight budgets and rushed production schedules, this little spelling error is a perfect example of the corner cutting that happened in Saturday morning television back then. Fact 3. The kids bought their magic car for only $7.34. The entire premise of Wonderbug started with 3 teenagers discovering an amazing deal at a junkyard, but the price they paid for Schleppcar was absolutely ridiculous, even by 1970s standards. According to the show's backstory, Barry, Cece, and Susan bought the beat-up dune buggy for just $7.34. To put that in perspective, even in 1976, a used car in decent condition would cost at least a few $100s, and even a total junker being sold for parts would typically go for $50 or more. $7.34 wouldn't even cover the scrap metal value of a vehicle. The oddly specific price makes it even funnier, like the writers wanted to emphasize just how worthless this car appeared before it magically transformed into the super-powered Wonderbug. That specific 34 cents really drives home the point that this was supposed to be the biggest piece of junk imaginable. Of course, that $7 investment turned out to be the deal of the century when they discovered the car could transform, fly, and basically do anything the plot required. Still, you have to wonder what kind of junkyard owner would bother with the paperwork and title transfer for a car that cost less than 2 movie tickets. Fact 4. One star became a clinical psychologist. David Levy played Barry Buntrock, the character who could somehow understand Wonderbug's mumbling and usually got credit for Susan's ideas. But what Levy did after Wonderbug is way more impressive than anything that happened on the show. After his acting career, Levy went back to school and earned his PhD in psychology, eventually becoming a professor of psychology at Pepperdine University in California. He completely left the entertainment industry behind and built a successful academic career, teaching and conducting research in clinical psychology. What makes his story even more interesting is that before he made that transition, his performance on Wonderbug actually earned him a Daytime Emmy nomination in 1978 for Outstanding Individual Achievement in a children's program. So he was nominated for an Emmy, then decided to walk away from Hollywood entirely to pursue psychology instead. Levy represents one of those rare cases where a child actor successfully reinvented themselves in a completely different field, especially in academia, which requires a totally different skill set from performing. While many child stars struggle with the transition to adulthood or staying in the entertainment industry, Levy took a different path and found success in helping people through psychology rather than entertaining them on television. That's a pretty remarkable career change that you definitely wouldn't expect from a Saturday morning TV show star. Fact 5. The co-star had a surprising second career. John Anthony Bailey played C.C. McNamara on Wonderbug under his stage name Jack Baker, and his career took a very unexpected turn after the show ended. In the 1980s, Bailey appeared in over 140 adult films before his death from bladder cancer in 1994 at the age of 47. This career shift is particularly jarring because Wonderbug was a wholesome children's program that aired on Saturday mornings, the kind of show that parents felt completely safe letting their kids watch. Bailey's transition from family-friendly entertainment to adult entertainment represents one of the more shocking career pivots in Hollywood history. It's the kind of thing that would have been almost impossible for fans to discover before the internet age, when people could easily cross-reference actors' complete filmographies. The contrast between C.C. McNamara, the goofy teenager solving mysteries with a magical car, and Bailey's later work couldn't be more extreme. While other child and teen actors from the era struggled to find work as adults or took on edgier dramatic roles to shed their clean-cut image, Bailey went in a completely different direction. His death at 47 cut short whatever path his life might have taken afterward. It's a reminder that child and teen actors from low-budget shows like Wonderbug often faced difficult career choices once they aged out of those roles. Fact 6. The theme song was written by pop superstars. The catchy Wonderbug theme song that got stuck in kids' heads every Saturday morning wasn't written by some anonymous television composers. It was actually created by 3 members of the Osmond brothers, Alan, Wayne, and Merrill Osmond. The Osmonds were already massive pop stars by the mid-1970s with hit songs like One Bad Apple and Crazy Horses, plus their own variety show on television. So why were they writing music for a low-budget Saturday morning kids show? They actually wrote most of the music for the Croft Super Show, which was the umbrella program that featured Wonderbug alongside other segments. Sid and Marty Krofft, the producers behind Wonderbug and dozens of other children's shows, had a knack for getting surprisingly big-name talent involved in their projects. The Osmonds brought their pop music sensibility and professional songwriting chops to Saturday morning television, giving Wonderbug a theme song that was genuinely catchy and well-produced compared to some of the cheaper-sounding themes on other kids' shows of the era. It's pretty wild to think that members of one of America's biggest pop groups at the time were sitting down to write songs about a magical flying dune buggy for 7-year-olds to watch while eating cereal. Fact 7. The costume trunk hid a secret driver. One of the most repeated lines on Wonderbug was the characters mentioning their costume trunk or wardrobe trunk in the back of the car. And there was actually a very practical reason for that seemingly random prop. That trunk wasn't just a place for the kids to store disguises for their adventures. It actually concealed a hidden human driver who controlled Schleppcar during scenes where the car needed to move on its own without any of the characters visibly driving it. This was a clever, low-budget special effect that let the show create the illusion of a self-driving, sentient vehicle without needing expensive remote control systems or complicated camera tricks for every scene. The trunk was large enough for a stunt driver to hide inside while operating the pedals and steering wheel, making it look like Schleppcar was driving itself around or responding to the characters' commands. The show even wrote dialogue specifically calling attention to the trunk to explain why it was always there and why it was so large and prominent in the back of the vehicle. This kind of practical effects work was common in 1970s television when budgets were tight and computer-generated effects didn't exist yet. It's the same basic principle as how they filmed the speeder bike chase in Return of the Jedi years later, just much simpler and cheaper. The trunk solution worked well enough that young viewers never questioned why the car always had this massive box in the back. Fact 8. Wonderbug was a blatant ripoff of Speed Buggy. If Wonderbug seemed familiar when it first aired in 1976, that's because it was essentially a live-action remake of Hanna-Barbera's animated series Speed Buggy, which had aired just 3 years earlier in 1973. Speed Buggy featured a sentient dune buggy with a personality who went on adventures with 3 teenagers solving mysteries, which is exactly what Wonderbug did with real actors instead of animation. Speed Buggy itself was borrowing heavily from 2 other sources: Disney's Herbie the Love Bug movies about a Volkswagen Beetle with a mind of its own, and Hanna-Barbera's own Scooby-Doo formula of teenagers and their unusual companion investigating strange situations. So Wonderbug was really a copy of a copy, taking an animated show that was already derivative and just making it with real people and a real car. The Sid and Marty Krofft productions were known for this kind of thing, creating live-action versions of concepts that had already proven successful in animation. The formula was simple. Take something kids already liked in cartoon form, add colorful costumes and sets, keep the budget as low as possible, and air it on Saturday mornings, where competition was mainly other low-budget shows. To be fair, this kind of recycling and borrowing of concepts was extremely common in 1970s children's television, where every network was trying to replicate whatever had worked for their competitors. Fact 9. The flying car was obviously a toy. Wonderbug had superpowers that included flying, and the show tried to depict this using chroma key special effects, which is an early version of green screen technology. The problem was that the effects were so cheap and obvious that even kids watching on fuzzy 1970s television sets could tell something was wrong. During aerial sequences when Wonderbug was supposed to be soaring through the sky, viewers could clearly see that the car was actually just a miniature toy model dangling in front of a blue screen backdrop. The toy car didn't move realistically, the proportions looked wrong compared to the ground below, and the blue screen fringing around the edges of the car created a noticeable halo effect that made it obvious the car wasn't really there. Some shots even showed the toy car bobbing on whatever wire or string was holding it up, completely destroying any illusion of actual flight. The show's special effects budget was clearly stretched thin across multiple episodes, so they couldn't afford to make the flying sequences look convincing. This was pretty standard for Saturday morning shows of that era, where networks knew kids would watch anyway and didn't invest much money in production quality. What's funny is that the show leaned into having Wonderbug fly in almost every episode despite how bad it looked, probably because flying was one of the main things that made Wonderbug super compared to regular cars. Fact 10. Susan was actually the smart one, but never got credit. One of Wonderbug's most consistent running gags was also a pretty clear example of casual sexism in 1970s television, even though it was probably meant to be funny. Throughout the series, the character Susan, played by Carol Ann Seflinger, would come up with the plans and solutions to whatever problem the group faced. But immediately after she explained her idea, Barry would repeat the exact same plan as if it were his own original thought, and CC would enthusiastically praise Barry for being so smart and clever. When this happened, Susan's standard response was just to shrug and say, "You get used to it." The joke was that Susan was clearly the brains of the operation, but constantly had her ideas stolen by Barry, who got all the credit. On one level, the writers were acknowledging that Susan was the intelligent one and that the boys were kind of clueless for not recognizing her contributions. But on another level, the show just kept repeating this same dynamic over and over without ever changing it or having the male characters learn to give Susan credit. It reflected the casual sexism of the era, where female characters in kids' shows were often smarter than the male characters, but still ended up in supporting roles. The fact that Susan's catchphrase was basically, "I've accepted being ignored," is pretty depressing when you think about it, even if it was supposed to be lighthearted comedy. Fact 11. Wonderbug crossed over with Bigfoot. In one of the strangest crossover events in Saturday morning television history, Wonderbug met Bigfoot in an episode titled Schleppfoot. This wasn't just any random Bigfoot either, but specifically the characters from another segment of the Croft Super Show called Bigfoot and Wild Boy, which featured a teenager raised in the wilderness by Sasquatch. The episode brought together two completely different Croft productions that had nothing to do with each other, creating a bizarre team-up that made no logical sense. A magical flying dune buggy and a cryptozoological creature hanging out together is exactly the kind of weird, anything-goes storytelling that defined 1970s children's television. The Croft brothers loved doing crossovers between their various shows, probably because it saved money on writing and production. Plus, it gave kids more reasons to watch all their different programs. Schleppfoot is now remembered as one of the most absurd examples of the Crofts' tendency to just throw all their properties together without worrying about whether it made any sense. For kids watching in the late 70s, seeing Bigfoot interact with a talking car was probably just another Saturday morning. But looking back, it's one of those moments that perfectly captures how strange and surreal children's programming was back then. Fact 12. The car's face could change expressions. Wonderbug wasn't just a car with personality, it was a car with an actual animated face that could display different emotions, which required some clever practical effects work. The car had articulated eyeball headlights that could move around to create the impression that Wonderbug was looking at things or reacting to situations. Even more impressive, the production team created multiple interchangeable front bumpers that were designed to look like different mouth shapes. Depending on whether Wonderbug was supposed to be happy, sad, surprised, or upset, the crew could swap out the bumper to match the appropriate expression. This meant that between scenes, or even during scenes with careful editing, they could give Wonderbug a full range of facial expressions that helped sell the idea that this was a living, thinking being rather than just a hunk of metal. The movable eyes and changeable mouth were a creative solution to the challenge of making a vehicle seem alive and emotionally expressive without using animation or expensive animatronics. It was pure practical effects work, the kind of hands-on problem solving that defined low-budget television production in the 1970s. The fact that they went to this much trouble to give a dune buggy proper facial expressions shows how committed the Croft team was to selling the fantasy, even if other aspects of the show, like the flying effects, were obviously cheap. Fact 13. The car was made by Duncan, the yo-yo company. When it came time to create merchandise for Wonderbug, the company that landed the toy car contract was Duncan, which seems like a random choice until you realize they were trying to diversify beyond their core business. Duncan was, and still is, primarily known as the Duncan Yo-Yo Company, the dominant manufacturer of yo-yos in America since the 1930s. But in the 1970s, Duncan was branching out into other toy categories, and apparently that included die-cast cars based on Saturday morning television shows. It's genuinely weird to think about the same company that made the toy every kid had in their pocket also producing miniature versions of a flying dune buggy from a Croft show. The Duncan Wonderbug toys are now collector's items, not because they were particularly well made or popular at the time, but because they represent this odd moment when a yo-yo company decided to get into the TV tie-in toy business. Duncan eventually refocused on yo-yos and related skill toys, so these Wonderbug cars represent a brief experimental period in the company's history. For collectors of 1970s television memorabilia, finding a Duncan Wonderbug toy is like discovering a strange artifact that connects two completely different parts of childhood: yo-yos and Saturday morning TV shows. Fact 14. The license plate changed. During transformation. Part of Schleppcar's magical transformation into Wonderbug involved a detail that required real behind-the-scenes work. The license plate physically changed. When the car was in its regular beat-up Schleppcar form, the California license plate read SCHLEP. But when it transformed into the super-powered Wonderbug, the plate magically changed to read one DERBUG, a vanity plate spelling out Wonderbug, with the number 1 replacing the letters WON. This wasn't done with special effects or camera tricks. It required actual practical prop swapping during filming. The production crew had to physically change the license plate between the before and after shots of the transformation sequence, making sure the new plate was properly attached and looked right on camera. It's one of those small details that most viewers probably didn't consciously notice, but it added to the completeness of the transformation and showed that the car had truly changed from a junky schlep car into the amazing Wonderbug. The plate change also created continuity challenges because the crew had to remember which version of the car was supposed to have which plate in every single scene. One mistake could ruin the illusion that the car was transforming. These kinds of practical details were what separated slightly more polished shows from the absolute bottom-tier Saturday morning programming. Fact 15. Only Barry could understand the car's mumbling. Throughout Wonderbug's 2 seasons, Schleppcar and Wonderbug communicated by making incomprehensible mumbling and grumbling sounds, all provided by voice actor Frank Welker. The weird part was that Barry, played by David Levy, was apparently the only human being who could understand what the car was saying. Whenever Wonderbug mumbled something, Barry would translate for Susan and CC, explaining what the car meant or what it wanted to do. This created a strange dynamic where Barry acted as an interpreter between the magical car and his friends, even though to the audience, Wonderbug's vocalizations just sounded like random noises with no discernible words or meaning. The show never explained why Barry had this special ability or how he learned to speak car. He just could, and everyone accepted it. This gave Barry a unique connection to Wonderbug and positioned him as sort of the leader of the group by default, since he was the only one who could have actual conversations with their vehicle. It also saved the writers from having to figure out how to make Wonderbug's dialogue understandable to viewers, since Barry could just tell everyone what the car said. From a production standpoint, it meant Frank Welker could make whatever sounds felt right for the scene without worrying about clarity, knowing that Barry would explain everything anyway.